Should your business start a podcast? That is the question we are answering on today's episode of Mind Your Marketing. All right, let's jump right in and look at the podcast landscape. It has really changed over the past couple of years. As it stands right now, there are over 5 million podcasts with 70 million episodes. Now, 100 million podcast listeners are in the US. That's roughly just shy of 1 in 4 people that at least listen to one podcast per month. I find that interesting. To me, it screams a lot of opportunity because the one big stat out of this that is a big takeaway, the average podcast stops after producing 7 episodes. So if you can get past that 7 episode point, if you can actually dig your heels in and say, okay, I'm going to do this and commit to creating a bunch of episodes, you might be in a better place when it comes to creating a podcast for your business. So those are the numbers, and the numbers tell a part of the story. There are some businesses that shouldn't do podcasts. Some probably are long overdue to start a show. So I want to go through in this episode really the formula, or at least what I've seen to say like, yeah, you should start a podcast, or hey, like maybe you don't need to, or maybe it's not a good fit for your marketing mix as a channel. So let's actually go through that. So if you're asking yourself why to start, or should you start, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is why? Why am I starting a podcast? Why is my company starting a podcast? Is it to compete? Did we see a competitor do that? Is our ego talking? Do we secretly want to be famous? Like all of those things could play in. Do we feel like it would be a great lead magnet for the business or help people come and join our funnel? What is the reason that you're doing it? And that can be a bunch of different reasons, the ego side of things are one part. The other side, which I think are I would say better reasons, but recruiting, brand exposure, maybe connecting with investors, showing people that behind the scenes, letting them be part of the story is another great thing you can do when it comes to creating a podcast. Now, the next thing you got to ask and you got to make sure, hey, do we have the resources for this? And not only the financial, but the time resources to go in and do this. Creating a podcast is not something that is a set it and forget it or an easy thing. It is a time commitment if you're going to create a show. Before we get into the, should you create or shouldn't you create, I have a list of, hey, here's where I think you should if you do this, or here's what it's good for, and here are reasons not to. Let's get into, I guess I'll tell you my experience so far. So this show has 215 episodes, give or take. It has really been an iterative process. So we started this show during COVID. I said, okay, I'm going to start the show. I want the show to go out and connect with people, while we were all locked in our houses. What came out of that is people are comfortable hopping on Zoom. They're comfortable talking. It's been great. And we've been able to build a machine. But our first 25, 30 episodes were not great. I had a poor mic. I didn't have recording or a video component. I didn't have a good show notes format. The hosting was off. So many things. So I will say this before we jump into it. If you are like, I'm going to start, I want to do a podcast, just start. The best recording equipment, all of that is what you have. You can add as you start to go. And I always challenge people. I'm like, can you record 10 episodes of your show? Then start going and buying stuff. And that will be such a game changer for you if you get in the habit of creating and producing content. So let's get into the list. I got it here on reasons why you should start a podcast and reasons why you should not. I'm going to start with the negatives on the reasons not to start a podcast. Look, podcasting, number one, it's a very hard medium to grow. It's a hard channel to grow. People talk about it a little bit, but getting listeners and getting loyal listeners to a podcast is one of the hardest things I've ever done as a marketer, and it has been a slog. It is a battle. We are just trying to get one more listener. And look, it adds up over time, but it can be pretty demoralizing and motivating when you put out your first 5 shows and you've got 15 people listen to your show and you're like, what am I doing, right? Am I talking to no one? But if you keep going and actually can get past that first 25 episodes and start to build a little bit of a follower base, it does get easier, or you just get better at it, but maybe it's not easier. But that's definitely one of the reasons not to, is it is very, very hard to grow a show with regards to getting listeners, getting people to come through consistently. 2, it costs money and time. It is a commitment. A lot of people think they can start a podcast and do 3 episodes and they'll be Joe Rogan. It's not how it goes. Joe Rogan has 2,000 episodes of his show. And if you go back and look at his first couple hundred, they are not great. Like I tell everyone, go watch his first episode. It is not good, but it's a testament to progress over perfection. And now, he's got this great show and what have you. I'd like to think this show has improved over the course of 200 episodes, but undoubtedly it has cost me personally a bunch of money to create this show and put it out. There's time costs, and then also we got equipment costs, and then we have like the labor costs associated with too, right? We have a video editor and a podcast producer. That's what we pay for in our system. I'll give you a little breakdown here. We pay for a person to figure out who are good potential guests, outreach to them, get them scheduled, get them set up. Then I record the show. That show then goes to our editor. He breaks out the video, audio, has that sent back. We get, all of the assets chopped up, ready to go. Then we put it live. I share it on social media. But there's labor costs associated with that. So I look at that, and it's something to not take lightly. So just be prepared to do that you're going to need help. Because if you put it all in yourself to record the show, edit it, then brand it, create a bunch of branded assets for your company, it's going to become a full-time job. And if you're in a small marketing department, or if you're running the other content channels, this is going to be something that really falls to the wayside. It's a project that takes specialists or a full-time person who can manage the media, in my opinion. There's last two reasons on why not to produce a show. Number 3, I'd say, is it requires that consistency and commitment. And if you are in an organization where your CEO needs to see results every month, and I want to see ROI on this podcast in the next 60 days, that's like you're pushing a boulder uphill in that regard, because trying to build something like this legitimately is going to take years if you don't have serious ad dollars or that celebrity name or status, or people don't know you from elsewhere. It's going to take forever to get people in. So if you have an executive team that sees things through a very short-term lens, I recommend not doing the podcast. Last, if you are viewing your podcast as a lead funnel, there are complete jabronis out there, especially in the agency and marketing land, who are like, start a podcast and use that as a way to get meetings with leads. That is the type of shit that makes marketers get a bad name and a bad rap. I think that is so corny, going out and trying to get meetings that way. It's like, it feels like it's like tricky. If you're a guy trying to date a girl, it's like trying to like trick the person into a date or trick them into becoming a lead. It's so whack. So I highly, if that's what you think about it, like, you're the wrong video now, you're listening to the wrong podcast. I just don't believe in that stuff, especially putting people in like lead funnels, so to speak, when they've come on a show. So to flip to this other side of it on like why you should create a show, and I'm going to get into how the show has helped my business, but it hasn't been by putting people in a lead funnel. So let's get into that why and how it can help. So the thing that, and how a podcast and why you should start one, if you are stuck for content, creating a podcast is a great way to create not only podcast content, but content like if you're watching this on YouTube, or maybe you're seeing a clip on social from the podcast. What the show does is it allows you to create once and then cut that content up to put out on other channels. So it can do really well on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, along with the podcast channel itself. It can also take the video assets, like in this case, we have a video show, and that can become its own standalone piece of content on YouTube. So I love that as well. Another reason why you should start, if you are willing to see the podcast almost as its own independent media company, and you really believe in the value that the show is giving, it is going to benefit your business. And it's going to do so in a couple ways. The connection that you will get and the connections you'll get with guests are unbelievable. So that has been the biggest thing for me. I've been able to create these connections and legitimately get to talk to people off air before we hit record, then we hit record. Then we connect on LinkedIn after, I send them their clips, and I'm able to just keep a dialogue, like their content, comment on things. They do the same. And this is how it's helped my business, which I'll get into, is once you're connected and you've talked with a person for an hour, that is a real human connection. You know that person more than just like a cold outreach or anything. And they're not dumb. People on the internet, they know what you do. And if you're staying top of mind, you're posting all the time, they're going to reach out to you when they need you. That's the key, when they need you. So you don't have to be reaching out to them or trying to put them in a funnel or anything like that. Our show, for instance, this show has led to a bunch of closed business from a couple avenues. One, past guests have just reached out and been like, hey, do you do this thing? And I go, yeah, we do. Okay, great. We help them with our agency. Or somebody who is connected to a guest sees the show, digs a little deeper, and then goes, hey, I actually need help with that. Can you do that? And sometimes we can and we do it. Other times we can't, and I can refer them to a place to go and get that marketing help. So that really helps when it comes to the halo effect, right? Is people see your face, they hear your voice, more and more you become the trusted figure, and more business will start to come your way. That's something I just believe in when it comes to creating content, and is a great reason to do a podcast or to do a YouTube show. It can get you out consistently demonstrating your expertise that you have, and your competitors might also have that expertise, but you're the one who's delivering the information via podcast, via the social media channels. So you're going to get positioned as the expert within your network's mind. That's going to help when anybody in the network actually needs your services. They're going to come to you and ask you for that help. Next, this is SEOs will love this, but look, one of the benefits, I don't think it's a reason why you should, but it's definitely a silver lining or a benefit to starting a podcast is backlinks. If you interview somebody as a guest, you make them the star, you feature them, you get into their story, they're going to link to that press on their company site, and that's actually going to help your pages and your company's SEO. This isn't, do not start a podcast for the primary reason of getting a backlink or getting backlinks, but it is definitely a welcomed bonus when you have a show. So that's something I'll say that it's kind of a perk. Lastly, I think another benefit to starting a show is it makes you a better communicator. I found that practicing, getting ideas across, doing things consistently, creating content calendars and systems, and then actually having to go and explain those ideas into a camera or into the microphone has helped me over time, and that's helped me in my sales calls or in my team trainings or whatever it may be. So I definitely think that another great reason or benefit to starting a show. Now you're probably there and you're listening to this and you're like, okay, buddy, so do I do this or not? Ultimately, I think you know the answer. And if you have the time, you have the resources, you have executives or people who can be the on-air talent that are committed to the show, do it. And do it and understand that it's going to be a battle to get listeners, all these things, but it's a great way to create content consistently. It'll help make you a better communicator, or whoever is going to be the host a better communicator. It's going to turbocharge the networking and connections you have if you do a interview show. And ultimately, it will help your business in that regard. And we are getting to this point now where we can probably monetize this show itself. So it took 2 years, but now I'm like, okay, I can probably monetize the show as its own standalone being an entity, and that's wild. So there's also that opportunity down the road to know that, hey, the more you do this and when you put your effort in, you'll eventually be able to monetize that way as well. All right, that is it. That's my ramble. That is the should you start a podcast, yay or nay. This is Mind Your Marketing. I'm your host, Jordan Shelton. If you did like this, please hit subscribe. Ultimately, that's what helps us grow both in the App Store, Spotify, and on YouTube. We are really trying to make a push on YouTube. So if you're listening to this in your car and you're like, okay, yeah, YouTube, whatever. No, go to YouTube, look up Jordan Shelton. Please hit that subscribe. That means the world to us as we build out more and more video content. Until next time, I'll catch you later.